Right, I'd like to introduce Simon Mills, who's joined us from the UK. He's here for, I think, until the end of this week. Simon's been practicing 42 years. He's written many books. I'm not sure how many books he's written, but quite a few. And he's an expert in herbal medicine. So, okay, over to Simon. We'll talk this morning.
Glad you can make it through the storms and floods. So, you're first years, are you? Is there any gate crashes from
a few third years?
So you know nothing. Is that a good place to start? I certainly don't. The more you stay in this business, the more you realise how little you know. So I'll start from a general sense of unknowing. We're going to actually start by, and I was asked to look at the effect of simple herbs and spices on your gut, on your digestion. And so I'm going to take, as you'll see, a very, very simple perspective on it, which is usually the most revealing, isn't it? Start simple. So that's me. I've been, as Phil was saying, around for a while. And when you've been standing for a long time, people start taking a bit more notice of you than they used to. So just keep standing. That's the main thing to do. Just hang on in there. Don't let the buggers grind you down, because they'll do their best. Yes, I've some of what I've done will maybe emerge as we go along, but I am still very much in practice. I have 3 sessions a week. I also, in the last 3 years, have been working for Pucker Herbs. We've got a big research program, we've got a new online education program, and we've got lots of other exciting projects, some of which you'll hear about if you stay around for Friday for the evening session. I'm catching up with some of the exciting stuff that we're doing, and some of the stuff that might be relevant to you. So, back to our storyline. I'm going to start right from the beginning, because plants and other critters have been in relationship right from before the beginning. We co-evolved, and everything that moves relies pretty much directly on plants, and they've grown together, their DNA has emerged together, their context and the relationships have always been very intimate and deep. And what each of these people know about plants would knock us into a tin hat, because their survival depends on this intimate knowledge. So humans didn't invent anything in relation to what plants do for us. They grew up knowing it. And we just got cleverer and started thinking a bit more widely about it. One of my favourite statistics came from an academic working in London, Norman Bissett, who went to study arrow poisons in Kalahari in southern Africa, where the Bushmen use arrow poisons for hunting. They cover long distances each day wearing a little buttock belt. With a couple of pouches on it, and in those pouches are a selection of 27 different arrow poisons that they have identified, which they use for different sorts of prey. So if they see something small, they'll use one type of poison. If they see something big, they'll use another. Which is pretty amazing when you think about it. But what's even more stunning is that every one of those arrow poisons has an antidote. Just think about that for a while. They never learned that in the book. That's just something that just reflects how complex and sophisticated our understanding of the world was once, before we separated ourselves from nature. So I'm going to briefly take you back to a view that begins here, because that's always where things are most powerful. When we get back to that very close relationship with plants. See, what they're doing is they're using their primary senses to nose their way around, literally, around the plant world. We've got similar senses up here on the top of our nasal cavity. We've got a bit of brain. It is literally a bit of brain. It's called the olfactory lobe. It's the only bit of brain that reaches the outside world. And it's, of course, the bit that we smell with. And we literally, as we inhale something that's aromatic, the molecules are absorbed across this membrane and directly reach the deep brain, the limbic brain. So we have a connection with our smell that is far deeper and more profound than any other sense. All the other senses have got lots of complicated mechanisms along the way. So when we see something, there's about 15 different mechanisms before we actually make any sense of it. With the nose, it's straight in. So we already have that deep connection, which mostly we've lost. But we also have another connection here, which is the tongue and the palate and the mouth, these mucous membranes of the upper digestive tract, and they're directly connected by cranial nerves, we call them, straight into the brain as well. So as critters move through the world, they are learning about it through these two main senses, taste and smell. Very powerful, direct stuff. There's things we might talk about if we get time later in the week, but mostly for year threes we talk about how we understand tongues, but they're covered in taste receptors, and we're going to talk a bit about some of those tastes today, because they're also very direct, very powerful. They switch on things, so they're an important part of our work. And they switch on because they connect directly with the brain, so the effect of a taste is measured in microseconds. So this is very direct, very fast. So, introduce you to my teacher. There's Emily. This is my farm in Cornwall, and we're now going back a very long time, as you can tell by the dress. This is pre-Laura Ashley. This is 1970s, mid-1970s. But she's not Emily, she's Anne. This is Emily. Emily is the mother goat. As you can see, she's quite a productive mother. She has produced many kids. And every morning, because she has a long lead here, I would take her out and stake the lead into the ground near one of the hedges that we had. And she would spend all day grazing this hedge, looking a bit like that. Now we just see lots of plants there. But it didn't take too long watching Emily to realise that she wasn't hoovering up the plants. She was being extremely selective in which ones she ate. And there were different plants. It was her smorgasbord. She chose from plants. But I soon realised that what she was doing was actually fine-tuning her needs, hour by hour, minute by minute almost. And I later learned that those weren't just plants, those were medicines, and they contained those sort of things. These are the sort of categories of phytochemicals that they contain. And you don't need to know them yet, but you will do. These are all important medicinal ingredients found in plants. Emily didn't know what they were called. She never read a book. At least as far as I know, she didn't read a book. But she knew what she needed. She was nosing them. Her nose and her tongue and her palate were her navigator through the world of healthcare. and she literally knows her medicines. So what I'm going to do is take you through the plant world as Emily will see it, and learn from Emily, because that's what I decided I wanted to be. That's my first teacher, still the best one. I wanted to be like Emily when I grew up. Still trying. But to get that direct connection with the plants has always been, to me, the most important thing. So I'm going to introduce you something quite off another topic altogether. You know what a reflex is? Put your hand on a hot thing, what do? It jerks back, doesn't it? That is before you've even thought about it. It's called a reflex response, and it's because the sensory, this pain, reaches the spinal cord and immediately loops directly to the muscles that pull it back. So we call that a reflex, or simple reflex arc, or reflex response. So why is this relevant? It's relevant because our bodies are run by reflexes. We just think of that as an obvious skeletal muscle reflex, but I'm promising you that everything that happens internally is a reflex. You trigger something and something happens, and they're programmed. They're part of our design, is to have reflex responses to provocations. Here's a very simple example of what I mean. It's actually called the law of the gut. And what it means is that if you place an object, a bolus, in the gut, anywhere in the gut, immediately by reflex, the muscle on the above side, if you like, contracts, and the muscle on the other side relaxes. That's clever, isn't it? There's no intelligence, at least no intelligence up here. This is intelligence down here. It's simply because the way the gut is wired up. So there's a reflex constriction one end, reflex dilation the other. What does that mean? It means it can only go one direction. It's the very simplest example of a visceral reflex. Just to give you an example of how things happen simply by the nature of the material that we have here. So this is literally called the law of the gut, and what it means is that things only go one way unless you puke, in which case this reflex is overridden and the opposite happens. And you get the constriction, things get pushed back the other way. You see what we're talking about here? We're talking about an innate intelligence. And it's because the gut is a brain. It's not a brain up here. It's actually called the enteric nervous system. But what it means is that if you have a horrible road accident and your brain dead, and you're not conscious, the gut still works. You put anything at any point in the gut which starts below the throat, and it'll start performing because it is entirely autonomous. There's a whole complex of nerve fibers at different levels of complexity. They're called plexuses or plexi, moving up to a series of little brains, literally, in the abdomen. You can see them. Ganglia, nerve ganglia. So the whole thing from swallowing to the other end is entirely run by the gut on its own. We interfere with it up here because that's the way we do. We've got a bus to catch, we need to go to the loo. So we start training the gut in different ways. We start interfering with it in terms of our mealtime, in terms of our fetishes and various other things. But if we could just back off, the gut would behave just like it does in a baby. It means poo when we poo. So we do have to train it a bit. But it's an interference. And many of the things we do when we're dealing with the gut, which gets itself in a pickle, is to simply, in a sense, remove it, if you like, from the control and then give it a bit of a break. Called relaxants sometimes, where we just calm down this and reduce some of that interference. So the point I'm making is that the gut has its own intelligence, and it works by a million different reflex responses. So everything happens as the material moves through the gut. It's sending signals. There is a response across in the gut. We all know the automatic thing. If once you've eaten, you tend to want to go to the loo, you know, on the breakfast time or whatever. And that's nothing to do with the fact that any food has reached the bowel. It's simply that when food hits the trigger points up here, it sends signals to say to the bowel, come on, let's move. Same thing if you get gastroenteritis. You know, you get a gut bug somewhere in some tropical country. It's usually up here that the infection happens in the stomach, but the bowel's still loosened because the signals are being sent. Simple examples. Almost everything, no, forget the almost, everything that happens in digestion is a series of signals, buttons being pressed somewhere, and the system responded in some way. So to run to the end of the story, our herbs are pressing buttons. We just need to find the buttons and find the herbs. 80 years ago, sitting on a porch in the States with an acupuncturist, after having certainly drunk a lot, and I've actually inhaled a bit as well. But anyway, we were sitting on a porch talking about actually a person who knew the condition, and he was talking about his approach. And I began to talk about my approach, and I realized, in fact, that we were both talking acu. His points were on the surface of the body, mine were internal points, not literally geographical ones, but pharmacological or physiological points. So we came up on that veranda in the dark with the glow worms in the bush with the word acupharmacology. And it's still a term I like. So I'm going to introduce you to a bit of the principles of acupharmacology, as Emily would understand them. So you don't need to have read much at this point. Just open up your senses. This is what I keep banging on about. The best plant remedies nudge. You see, you can quickly, and you will do in a course like this, learn lots of stuff about comparing plants with other pharmacological agents, because they are pharmacological agents, and you'll have to know this stuff because you'll need to engage in conversation with not only your patients but with other health professionals. So you need to know the sort of conventional way of understanding the world of medicines. But when you've built that net and you catch your first fish, then you can put away the net. And the fish, I promise you, is that the best plant remedies do something different than the usual conventional medicines. They actually nudge responses in the body. And the good news is you know it at the time. Because you may be thinking that you're learning herbs because they're gentle. And they may take weeks or months to work. Bullshit. My usual requirement, it'll take a while before you can get to this, but my usual request of a patient is to ring me tomorrow. Let me know how things have been going. And they will even give them the medicine in front of me and ask how it feels. Remember the reflex responses? The mouth and the nose and the tongue, all those direct wired loops, microseconds. Many of the things I'm going to talk about work within minutes. So let's go. This is fun, isn't it? Remember Emily as well? We're going to see what Emily thought about all this stuff. It's going to come eventually. I didn't make that up. All the traditional systems of medicine are pretty clear about this. The gut is where we do our main work. In Ayurvedic medicine, which is an area that we do a lot of in Paka, they have a word Agni, A-G-N-I, which is digestive fire, and it's their version of Chi. It's their version of the core energies, the literally core energies of the body. And unleashing Agni is one of the most powerful things you can do in medicine. And again, you know that at the time. This all happens very quickly. So, how do we approach digestive and bowel problems? We're not going to go into much detail, you'll be pleased to know. But just to know, the gut has a vast surface area, a couple of football fields. When you take all those microscopic villi and unwrap them, we've got a massive surface covered in receptors. So all that surface is just full of nerve fibers receiving signals from the contents of the gut. And each of those is a reflex loop. Remember the reflex? So there's a vast array of responses. So they're all responding to what's coming through and sending signals further down the loop. Remember the law of the gut? It's all innate. You don't have to use our brain. Plants have obvious topical, that means local effects, that translate well as agents to modulate gut responses. That's the acupharmacology bit. So let's start with them. Have you heard of slippery elm? Do you know what slippery elm is and what it feels like? Has anyone ever felt slippery elm? It's like goo. It's mucilage. And it's the inner bark. This is the outer bark. The inner bark is there. And this, one of my students in the States, we go on field trips once a year out there. And this was a fallen slippery elm log, which we were stripping off the bark and drying it and turning it into a useful mucilage. So this is my very quick summary of these major constituents or ingredients of plants. And the format is that on the left-hand side we describe the plants that prominently have these ingredients. In this case it's slippery elm, marshmallow, you've got some marshmallow out in the garden, and plantains, you've got some plantains out in the garden as well. In the middle we have the subjective impact, what it feels like. So they're slimy, that's the first thing about mucilages, they're slimy quality. A couple of lovely old English words, they're emollient and emulsant, they soothe. Particularly used for wound remedies, for external wounds and abrasions, because they just find a nice soothing thing. But internally, they reduce coughing. Coughing that's due to dry irritability. It doesn't take much to put it together. You've got a dry cough, you want something slimy. That's meant to be soothing. Soothing upper digestive inflammation, same thing. Think of your upper digestion when it's irritated as like a wound. You want something soothing on it. Someone trying to get in, or was that? So it's a simple physical effect. And on the right hand side we've got a bit of science, if you like. So the physical basis for soothing properties is obvious. It's the simple property of the mucilage. So actually, cypriol is likely in the new classification of medicines to be called a medical device rather than medicine, because there's no pharmacology involved, it's simply a physical effect. We just get that direct soothing effect. Can you get it? So we've got Emily's verdict on the top right hand to all of these things. She just thinks that's the slimy bit in a plant. And she will use it when she wants that soothing property. Simple, isn't it? Get it? The one thing that is worth noting here, apart from the obvious effect on the lining of the gut, reducing the coughing. Why, how could that happen? Because the mucilages are basically a bunch of sugar molecules stuck together in a chain, so they break down within an hour, so often faster. You just get lots of little sugar molecules. So there's no soothing effect much beyond the stomach. Cypriol lasts quite a bit longer, and there are other mucilages I haven't got here that you find in seeds and so on, linseed and so on, psyllium seed, which because of their seed quality they can survive and go further down in the gut. But most of the things in these plants will have gone soon after swallowing. So how could it reduce coughing? And the answer is it's a reflex. Stupid. The lung airways, when we were a little embryo once upon a time, we just had one long tube down the middle of us, and then the tube made a little pocket called a diverticulum. That little pocket started branching, and it came from around here in the tube and started branching out as its own little pocket and became the airways. Carries with it the same nerve origins as the gut at this level. So the soothing effect on the airways is simply because of the soothing effect on the gut at this point. And you get a reflex, remember the word? Reduction in irritation in the airways. Magic, isn't it? There we are, there's marshmallow in your garden. And here's a couple of well-known products that are based on issues. Do you have Gaviscon in this country?
Yes.
Yeah, it comes from a seaweed plant. It's quite natural, actually. Fibre gel, that's from Ispagula, which is a type of psyllium seed. That's the fibre that's a fibre with a lot of mucilage on it, which actually survives all the way through. Provides a soothing effect, a bulking effect lower down in the gut. And then we've got cypriol tablets there. Right, next one. That was the mucilage. Recognise this plant? Do you know what it is? Witch hazel. What does witch hazel look like when you buy it in the shop?
Liquid.
What sort of colour liquid?
Clear, I think.
Yeah, a bit like gin. I prefer gin to water. But you know, it's clear, which is a bit odd, really, because tannins, which is the ingredient that we're talking about here, are red. So the witch hazel that you buy in the shop, in the watercolour liquid, has had the tannins taken out of it. If you really want the full effect of witch hazel, do it this way. Right, so they're found in any dead wood, any leaf in the autumn will be red. It's the red of tannins. You find in roots, you find any woody material, bark. But the classic examples are oak and witch hazel. And the first thing, this is what people notice about tannins, is that they make you pucker. Not pucker, P-U-C-K-E-R. So how do we remember that? Because if you've left the black tea in the teapot for too long, that's when the tannins come out. And what do you feel? You feel that dry, puckering quality. That's the tannins. It's It's called astringency, and of course it is used for making leather. So to make leather, you simply sit an animal skin in a usually oak-based, very strong tannin solution, and it converts the soft tissue into the hard tissue in a very similar way to boiling an egg converts the liquid into a solid. What's happening is that the liquid, the molecules slide over each other. In the solid form, they've knotted up. Can you reverse that? Imagine trying to reverse that boiled egg. Doesn't work, does it? Same thing is, this is irreversible knotting. So it makes leather. Same thing happens if you wash a wound with it. It makes leather on the exposed surface. That's pretty clever. Because if you're out on the wood somewhere in the bush, you're out of mobile phone range, and you fall into a fire, you've got a 3rd-degree burn, your skin is opened up, you're going to die. Unless you do something soon, because you've exposed your inner tissues to whatever's going on around the infection. Sepsis is most likely to happen. So what can you do? You can't ring up the helicopter because your phone's not working. So the best thing to do is to get the fire back up again. Find any broad-leafed tree. Oak is ideal, but in a pinch, any broadleaf tree, just get twigs or bark on the tree, start cooking it until you get the red colour of the tannins coming up. The dark brown red as you can. This is important. Let it cool. And then wash your wound. It'll form a seal from the French écharpe, French for scar. It seals it up, turns that exposed tissue into leather, and will save your life. Looks as ugly as shit, but it's, at least you will be alive to admire it. It simply forms an artificial protection against wounds. So that's how tannins work, but now what happens if you swallow them? Same thing. So if you've got any inflammation, gastritis, esophagitis, any inflammation of particularly the upper digestion, hit it. That could, of course, be gastroenteritis. Remember I said that about you get infection up here and you get diarrhea by reflex. One of the old ways of managing gastroenteritis to reduce the danger of diarrhea, because you're losing a lot of electrolytes with diarrhea. That's the way that still the majority of children dying in the world, third world, are dying of diarrhea because they're losing all their fluids and their electrolytes. So the old trick was to stem that diarrhea by reducing the inflammation in the digestive tract. So it's a standard treatment for that sort of thing. And there's no doubt about how it works. So what does Emily say? It's astringent, that's what Emily says. And you know it works because of the astringency. You'll know a wine that's got more tannins in because it's got that slight drying quality to it. It's easy to pick out. You leave the tea too long, easy. So just to remember, there's a lot of plants out there with a high tannin content which have those properties. They get in the way a bit of digestion. So they clot proteins so that they reduce the assimilability of some proteins. So having a lot of black tea on an impoverished diet is not a very good idea because it will reduce the value, nutritional value of what you're eating. But that aside, certainly for short-term use, it's a very powerful medicine. Bit of leather there just to remind you. And this actually is the most powerful source of tannins of all. Oak galls, have you heard of these? It's what the oak trees produce when they're bitten by certain insects. So this is a solid secretion from the oak, and it's pure tannins. And the best leather in the world is made with oak oils. This is the most highly prized tannin. Very too strong for us to take into. Right, fibre. We're moving through this now. We're still on the physical thing, aren't we? This is bulking stuff, isn't it? Flax-psyllium. It bulks the bowels. It's demulcent again, a bit like the mucilages. And there's no mystery. The bowels like being full. They like our diet is far less fibrous than it should be. In the 1950s, a man who was observing African poo noticed that it floated, and that was because it was so full of fibre. And he made the point that we are fibre deficient in developed countries, and all sorts of things follow from that, which we might touch on a bit later today. So our bowels like being full, so these help to add to the bulking effect. It also reduces cholesterol because it helps to hold things in with the food, so the cholesterol doesn't get absorbed as fast, and particularly important, reduces the hypoglycemic index. In other words, the glucose doesn't go in so fast, so you don't get that surge of insulin. It helps protect you from the problems that lead eventually to diabetes. So fibre is good, isn't it? And that's all it is. This is just the bulk stuff. And there's always a lot of that if you're living close to nature. Here's another one. Anthraquinones. You might not recognise that name, but you may recognise senna and cascara. My teacher, the one that wasn't here, once said to me a long time ago, he was an old man, great prestige and importance. He said, if anyone tells you that herbs don't work, give him or her a cup of Senapod tea of an evening and ask in the following morning if he is of the same opinion. No doubt. These are laxatives. They're 8 hours delay, by the way. There's a good reason why you ask them the following morning, because it takes a while for the mechanism to operate. No doubt whatsoever what they do. It's a reflex effect. Interesting. No question about it. We don't use these much because you can easily become dependent on them. That's quite common. But for short-term use, when there's a problem or obstruction or something that you really do need to get a move on, or as part of a training program with herbs, you can put a little bit of some of these things in with a broader mixture just to re-educate the bowel, to get it back to its normal rhythm. The point I'm making there is that the bowel, unless it's really whacked, knows what to do, because it has its own internal times and rhythms. So every 8 hours the bowel reaches a peak of activity, and at that point you're most likely to go to the loo. So that's 3 times in a day. If you're alert to it, you can pick up on it and respond. But as I say, we mostly drive our natural rhythms out for one reason or another. But that inherent rhythmicity is always so it's re-education is often about just relearning how to pick up on the cues. That's aloe. We use the aloe juice, don't we, quite a lot? Well, that's where the rind has been removed and you get the sap from inside. But the rind is full of laxative properties. This is the root. Right. Now, I happen to notice that you had some of this in your garden, so I picked some. We'll invite you just to take a tiny little piece and bite on it. Pass it on. Wormwood Artemisia absinthium, French word by the way is vermouth, so it's an aperitif, digestive remedy. And as you taste it, you will know how it works. Has anyone tasted vermouth before? They'd be surprised. Powerful stuff, isn't it? Getting it? This is the most powerful and most important medicine in history. Bitters have always been seen to be at the top of every traditional medical treatment. People react differently to it, so you're on the one end of the scale. Anyone liking it?
Oh my goodness, it's
Yeah, yeah, I see this on the other end of the scale.
Are you not enjoying it either?
Right.
As a sprinkle, no.
You can take a sip of something if you want. These are the most important remedies of traditional medicine, the bitters. I'll tell you why in a minute. But here they are. They're in wormwood, they're in chicory, they're in hops. We call it bitter, don't we? Coffee. Proper coffee. Leave the milk out. Angostura bitters. Make pink gin with. Quinine. Tonic. Alderago, there's lots of others. All they do is they're bitter. They stimulate the appetite and digestion. You're really having trouble, aren't you? I'll talk to you afterwards.
So sorry.
There may be, this may be the most important day of your life. Because people respond to bitters in very much the way their body's set up. You'll become an addict before long, betcha. They stimulate appetite and digestion, and that's because the bitter taste buds that you've just been tickling are hardwired to switch on your whole upper digestive system within seconds, with less than a second. It's a hardwired loop. What you've just had released are hormones, cholecystokinin, secretin, various other gastrin, various other hormones, which are released in the stomach and upper digestion. And these hormones switch on all sorts of things. They increase your appetite, and they increase your digestion instantly. Cholagogue means they stimulate your bile. Bile is what the liver produces as a get-out clause. The liver's doing everything. If you can't manage something, it dumps it in the bile. And the bile goes into the bowel. And then there's a whole big story about what happens with the bile and the bowel get together. But putting it at simplest, increasing bile flow usually is diluting it, and that's usually a liver cleansing process. It's always seen as cooling, yeah.
Can I ask a question? I'm taking herbs that for stimulating bile acids anyway. Would that have increased the reaction that I've had to it?
What herbs are you taking?
Got to
Cola.
ginkgo, echinacea. I can't remember. There's a four. I can't remember the four.
What's the taste like?
Pretty bad, but not as bad as that.
They're not particularly bitter. Ginkgo's
No,
not
but
particularly
I'm just wondering if because I'm already taking those, that's why I had such a reaction.
I don't know, but
Oh, okay.
everyone's wired up differently.
Yeah, I guess so.
And we also have different tasters. So some people can't even taste bitters, but there are others who can taste it 1/50,000th of a gram, a milligram. You can really get some very acute tasters. So we're all wired up differently, but And the response to bitters varies, and there's a whole traditional cosmology about, well, we're touching on it. Bitters are always seen to be cooling. This is a whole other story. But what does that mean? Briefly, anyone ever felt a dead body? What's the first thing you notice?
Cold.
It's horrible, isn't it? Cold is death. Illness was always seen to be mostly a cold event. And aging is a cooling event because you're heading in one direction. So life is heat. Now imagine if you were now 6-year-old and you've been sitting here for 3/4 of an hour. Would you still be sitting here 3/4 of an hour? No, you would not. The place would be wrecked. That's because when you're 6, you're hotter than you are when you're 26, or 36, or 66. Heat is also vitality and activity. And to put it in very quick shorthand, everyone knew that the main job of healing was to maintain heat, because cold was the wrong direction. Sometimes you get too much heat, that's another story, and you need to cool that. But there's one example, which is fever. And again, cut a very long story short, fever is not a bad thing. Fever is your body ramping up the heat to protect itself against cold. So you don't stop a fever in traditional medicine. You manage it. There's a whole thing about fever management. But yeah, it can get too hot. If you take a bitter when your body is, use Fahrenheit or centigrade? Celsius, yeah. So 40, 41, 42, getting a bit close to the edge there. If you take a bitter at that point, the body temperature comes down. Everyone knew that because fever was the main thing that people used to deal with in the old days. It's cooling. Simple way of understanding that is, your mum always used to say, don't go swimming after you had a meal. So you cramp up. That's because all the blood has been sent to your core, to your digestion. You need to invest a lot to get the food out, the quality of the food, so you drive a lot of energy, heat and blood into your core, which means there's less of it to go around. When you have a fever, the heat is going back out, so you're sweating, and it's not heat going out. But there's almost like a design flaw, because the heat's been taken away from the digestion, which might be a problem if that's where the infection is. But the good Lord was very kind to us, because he gave us bitters. And we all knew what bitters did. They converted heat back into nourishment. That was the simple one-liner. They improved nourishment, converting heat into nourishment. So they're not suppressing anything, they're transforming it. So bitters are the primary agents for getting nourishment out of heat. Got it? And it works just like that. Temperature comes down straight away. And it's particularly for when you get gut infections. So if you are traveling in a hot country and you do get a gut infection, or you want to avoid getting a gut infection, take the bitters with you. I've had plenty of people I know who have come to me before going to India or wherever it is, and have asked for their standard mix from me, and they're still standing when those around them going down with hepatitis and gastritis and dysentery and all the rest of it. This protects you. by maintaining mainly your stomach juices, which are your main defence.
What's the certain combination of herbs?
Oh, I'm never going to give a combination. Do you know why? Because I don't ever have recipes. Everyone has something different. So we now know these are mediated by basically receptors on fibres in the, not just in the mouth, but also we now know down through the gut and right through the body. There are TAS2R receptors, and they switch on responses instantly, and you get all sorts of effects. I can talk without repetition about bitters for a week. So big is this topic. So we're just going to have to pass quickly and just note what MD knows about bitters. That's all you need to know. How do you know if a bitter's working? Taste is stupid. If it doesn't have a strong enough taste, it probably ain't. You've just had a marker there. Wormwood is one of the standards. You don't actually, having had it, we now know that you can actually get effects by putting it in a capsule. But if you want to know if it's going to work, taste it anyway, just so that everyone has a different response rate too, so sometimes the dose has to be titrated. So here are standard bitters. Look at them. Pretty familiar, aren't they? There's vermouth from wormwood. There's a bitter. There's a bitter. That's a bitter. It's not only the gin, but the tonic is bitter. Angostura, good coffee, various bitters. My favourite is Underberg. You have to go to continental airports in Europe to pick those up. But do you recognise these? The little paper wrap bottles and open them up. Wow. If you're travelling, get them. There's coffee, standard bitter, meant to be taken after eating that sheep that hasn't been in a fridge in the middle of the desert. You need it. They call that a digestive, TIF, when you take it after a meal, and an aperitif if you take it before a meal. But everyone knew that bitters were helpful for digestion. Chicory was a coffee substitute in the Second World War. Now, moving on, just when we thought you'd have the most important type of medicine in tradition, here's the other important. Sometimes called pungent. The acrid remedies include the hot spices. So what do they do? Bitters are cooling, aren't they? They're heating. Anyone have any doubt about that? You know, you've gone out for a hot date, you've showered, you've deodorized yourself, but you've chosen to go to a Mexican or an Indian, and you chose the Vindaloo. And no longer are you a nice perfumed, you're sweating like the proverbial, and beginning to smell a bit, and that's because you're heating up inside. It's literally, that translates as increased circulation. And I keep telling the story because when I did medical sciences a very long time ago, and my first pathology textbook was written by one of the main authorities in the field, and he'd written in the foreword that he wouldn't have to write this book on diseases, pathology, if we could come up with an agent that maintained blood flow in the tissues. Every disease starts with a breakdown of blood flow in the tissue. Years later, they realised, stupid, we've got remedies that increase blood flow in the tissues. They're these guys. So remember I said that bitters reduce food poisoning in hot climates. So do these, but with the opposite way. They're fighting fire with fire. the closer you get to the equator, someone did a book about this, a couple of anthropologists, the closer you get to the equator, the hotter the food becomes. It's almost like culturally people adapt to the risk of gut infections by increasing the heat. So if you're travelling to tropical climates, for God's sake, don't order a burger, because you'll be down with dysentery before you can say or be. Eat the street food, the hottest you can find. Stuff that's been sitting sweltering in that cauldron that makes your mouth flame up. That keep you. And then use the bitters when that has failed. Yeah, using hot and cold now. One of the oldest plants in traditional medicine. Remember, I said fever is a hot response, we don't want to suppress it. Most fever management uses heating remedies to keep the fever going until it's finished its job. Because fever is all about getting the white blood cell wild, fired up. A couple of degrees increase in body temperature, you get 3 times the rate of activity with white blood cells. That's what fever's for. It's to help you fight off things. And the main reason people die of fevers is because the fever puff goes out of them. You know, they can't keep it going, it's quite hard work. That's when you either go to a sweat lodge if you're in North America, or you do some other things to just keep the heat going. You can apply it topically to an arthritic inflamed joint for the same reason, because inflammation is also a defense. I hate the word anti-inflammatory, because it's immediately a suppressing, implies that you're suppressing the natural response. You sometimes have to do it to relieve yourself of pain, but every time when you use an anti-inflammatory, another fairy dies. This is not how it should be. Inflammation is a defense. The best thing to do is to figure out why it's having to happen, and then get out there and clean up somewhere. There's some junk in there. Clean up. That's the way you do it. But if you apply cayenne or mustard to an inflamed joint, you actually substitute for the inflammation without all the pain and the distress you get from it, because you're just bringing heat in, the blood in from outside, and that's what inflammation is all about, bringing extra blood into a tissue. And this is confirmed. So, spices increase heat, thermogenic. They're a metabolic stimulant, and they involve triggering pain fibers, basically. That's what the heat is. It's tickling your pain fibers in the mouth. You get a reflex increase in blood flow. Remember the word reflex? There it is again. It's not just on the site. So you just follow the chili. You think your mouth is inflamed. It isn't. It's just an illusion. It's because you're tickling the pain fibers. But you get that increased blood flow, obviously anywhere nearby, which is quite good if you've got respiratory infections and sinus problems. But we were doing tests on this a long time ago, and we were putting little thermocouples on the skin, and you can see the body temperature rising within minutes of swallowing a capsule with cayenne. It's reflex right around the body. Pretty magic, isn't it? That's all we need to know. Mind you, Emily only bumped into horseradish, where she comes from, because we don't have chili and ginger growing wild in England. We're limited, and of course that was true of humans as well. So as soon as they discovered ginger, they plundered it, and they occupied the world to get it. So almost all of the colonization from Europe across the world was driven by the hunt for these things. They were the most valuable commodity in human history. More valuable than gold weight for weight. extinct in the wild 2,000 years ago, and it's still sterile. All the ginger wheat is grown by root. Problem, there's no wild ginger anywhere. It's one plant, basically cropped hundreds of times. Sterile. That's how valuable these remedies once were. There it is. That's the other valuable one, black pepper. And the story of the colonisation of the world, of course, has the Dutch and the English and the Portuguese heading off east. The Spanish thought that they would take a shortcut. The story, Christopher Columbus took the shortcut around to the East Indies and bumped into another little island called America, and found, instead of ginger, this fella. That's heating. Got the same type of action on the paint fibers. Less hot, but it's still powerful. And here's a little example. This is a bit of chemistry just to frighten you. You'll come to recognise this is a molecule structure. A molecule structure as we usually conventionally describe it. And this is capsaicin. And these are the ways that the car. Do you recognise any of this stuff in your own chemistry, right? Well, watch this bit at the end here. These are the gingerols from. Can you see something interesting? The bottom left there. Yeah. See that shape? It's called a vanillyl group. And it's that which engages with the vanilloid receptor on paint fibers. So this is the hot principle. Chemically. This is piperine from pepper. Different type of structure again. These are all very different molecules, but they all have this structure on the end. And finally, curcumin. See it again? So you just had your first bit of phytochemistry out like that. Wasn't too painful, was it? So there we are, the vanillyl group. And then there's some less hot ones that aren't in the same category but still have heating properties. And there's the screen outside in the hallway says this happens to be my favourite remedy. Ceylon cinnamoroche, cinnamon zeylanicum, cinnamon verum, lovely aromatic, lots of volatiles which you're going to come to in a moment. Right, we're moving on. What time do we finish?
11 o'clock.
Yeah, you can break or you can keep going, whatever.
A short break if you want, Matt.
What a break, or shall we run through? Because we've got quite a bit to cover. If you can sit there, yeah, because we started a bit late.
Yeah.
Okay. You can leave if you need to. Let's press on. Because this is also, everything about this is amazing. I hope you're beginning to get infected with enthusiasm about this topic. So these are otherwise known as the polyphenols, which you've probably heard of. Two examples of polyphenols are flavonoids and anthocyanidins. Flavonoid is from the Latin from yellow, and antho is the Latin for dark blue, purple. So these are pigments in plants, the yellow and the bluish purple colours. You find polyphenols like this in every plant actually, but they're particularly found in berries, in fruits. And what do you first notice about them? The colour. But they were principally used in fever management because they stabilise the body's response to fever. They were seen as digestive remedies, wound remedies, and for coughs and colds. And we don't need to go into it because we don't have the time, but there's a huge literature about polyphenols. From Emily's point of view, there are the colours. This was lifted from a newspaper, but I think it's a pretty good example of how this translates into dietary advice. We used to be told when we were young, eat your greens. We now tell our kids, eat a rainbow each day. And kids can get into that. Have you had a purple yet? Have you had a red yet? Have you had a yellow yet? Yes, Mummy. And this is just a quick summary of the confirmed benefits of these ingredients in our diet. And this is mainly dietary now. We've moved away from particular value of the herbs, although they are in the herbs as well, but this is food, isn't it? Good stuff. This is another of my favourites, the hawthorn or the mayflower, Crataegus, heart and circulatory remedy. One of the best ones we use for circulatory problems. Here's another bit of chemistry, just when you thought you'd done your chemistry for the day. Here's another one that's even more interesting. The original flavonoid was isolated as rutin in the 1930s by an Hungarian-American scientist, of course, at Georgie, who isolated from the pith of the citrus. He was looking for the full effect of citrus against scurvy. You know the story about vitamin C? It was discovered as limeys. You know, the British sailors discovered that they could keep scurvy at bay when they were months away at sea by eating lemons. They found vitamin C, and that became the active principle for many years. But some people, like Sir George, thought there must be more to it than that. And they found another factor he called a bioflavonoid. And it was called rutin. And he actually called it vitamin P originally because from the pith. And he saw vitamin P and vitamin C as the main factors. This is the flavonoid bit here. And you've got a couple of sugars, these are sugars, stuck up. As soon as it hits the stomach, it's called hydrolysis. Basically, the sugars get cut off. And you can end up with a glycone, it's called, these are glycones, sugar. This turns into that same thing, but without the sugars. And this is called quercetin, which is the most widespread flavonoid in the world. All plants have lots of it. So that's quercetin. We have buckets of it. There's a slight problem. Quercetin, as such, is quite difficult to absorb from the gut. It's a big molecule. It doesn't get through the gut wall very much. And I remember back in the 80s being told by a lofty German professor that we were wasting our time looking at flavonoids because they don't get absorbed. But we discovered that they do, thanks to our microbiome, gut flora, which breaks up the flavonoid. It's called C-ring cleavage. This is the C-ring cleavage breaking up, and it forms from this molecule two little molecules. This is a polyphenol, remember the word? These are simple phenols. These are small. These do get absorbed. These are fast and furious little critters. They're active. And to give an example of how active they are, here's an example of one, otherwise known as aspirin. So aspirin is a simple phenol. And these are all slightly different. But a quick summary effect is that eating your greens and your yellows and your reds and your blues is like having daily aspirin. The effects are spookily. The research on aspirin and on fruit and vegetables is like parallel tracks. It's the polyphenols getting converted by our microbiome into useful dietary agents, and they have huge effects on it. So we're talking about the gut today, but basically polyphenols have massive impact on our circulatory health. But they only have that impact because of our gut converting into useful agents. So almost anything to do with the function of the circulation is affected by these simple phenols. There's pomegranates, one of those superfoods, very high in polyphenols. In the seeds, good news starts here. So is cocoa. So 70% or more chocolate is a medicine. And if anyone doubts it, send it to me. Because the research evidence on cocoa solids is amazing, particularly for circulatory health and immune and inflammatory health. So cocoa gets even better. Red grapes and wine are rich in polyphenols. So here we have medicine. We've just had a lovely meal with red wine, and we followed up with chocolate. We can go to bed in peace. We've done well for ourselves. Right, so we're moving on. We now want to look at another important ingredient in plants, the essential oils, the aromatics. And I'm just going to pass a couple of examples around so you can remind yourself of how wonderful these actually are. This is fennel and lavender. Just have a little reminder of the lovely aromatic properties of these plants. So they smell nice, and we use them for flavouring. We use them for all sorts of things that are in the kitchen, aren't they, as herbs to flavour our food. So we know them because they're aromatic. They're also warming mostly. Remember we were talking about ginger's warming and cinnamon. These are less warming, but still warming. They settle the digestion, primarily used to settle colic and spasm and upset stomachs. When you run down, they will encourage our digestion. And they warm you up, particularly when you've got congestion in the chest. Again, there's another reflex effect from the gut. And we know a lot about their effects. Carminative is the fancy name for settling colic, so it reduces spasm in the gut. Spasmolytic is the scientific name for something that does that. There's that horrible word, but that's the pharmacological evidence that it reduces inflammation. In concentrated form, they're antiseptic, but you need to make them in essential oils for that. They encourage production of mucus out of the lungs, and they also help pass water through the kidneys. And they're just the aromatic elements in plants. See, one of the reasons for bringing Emily into this is that so far we've been talking about the pharmaceutical discipline which everybody knew. You don't need a degree in sciences to get this. Every person, or certainly in every community, there will be people, usually women, who got this, and you would know how to work this because they were using their senses. Keep coming back to this idea. You don't need to read books to get this stuff. Some examples. Lovely lemon balm settles the upper digestion. Also very calming up here. It's a general calming remedy. Here's another one you know. Same sort of thing actually as that of balm. There's the fennel you just been smelling, one of the best remedies to warm up a cold digestion. I think you can probably imagine what that feels like. If you've got an upset digestion, it's difficult to tell, especially if you haven't met somebody and they ring you up and they say, what should I take for my upset stomach? And I don't know whether it's a cold stomach or a hot stomach. So I said, well, try two things. Let me know which is the one you favour. Try fennel as the simplest and one of the best warming stomach remedies. Try peppermint as one of the simplest cooling remedies, and let me know which one you prefer, because that's the answer. If it's the warming one, it's because you've got a cold problem. If it's the cooling one, it's because you have a hot problem. And by the way, if that is the case, get on to the bitters. Begin to see that bitters affect people differently. Because we don't know whether you're hot or cold. This is a very simple example of how you just test the system. You just try it out with teas. Oh yes. This sort of belongs with the very hot remedies, but only when it's raw. And it's different from the cayenne and gingers that we talked about. It doesn't work on vanilloid receptors. This works because it contains a sulfur molecule, just like mustard and wasabi and horseradish. They're all hot, aren't they? But they're a different sort of heat. And remember I said that cayenne and ginger was illusion? Mustard and horseradish is not an illusion. You are actually burning when you take those. So any heat you get when you've had wasabi in a Japanese place, that's real. It's because of the contains the sulfur inside the molecule. Raw garlic also contains this sulfur ingredient, and it is, when it's raw, quite a powerful, volatile. It's aromatic, but it's got that extra heat running with. If we had time, we would talk a lot about garlic as a medicine. But we don't, so we're going to press on. Another category. This is marigold. I want you to just press the flower head and feel, just about feel it's a little bit wet, but inside the flower head of the marigold there is resin. Pine resin, it's got that sticky, tacky quality. Sticky quality. That's was considered to be one of the most important medicines of the old days. Think about the Bible story, baby Jesus getting 3 gifts from the wise men, 2 of which were resins, frankincense and myrrh. This is now called frankincense boswellia. That's frankincense. So they're sticky, but they're strongly antiseptic. They, when you can get them to the mucosal surfaces, they're very powerfully generate white blood cell activity. And they've been shown to be anti-inflammatory. But why is this so deficient? The best way of illustrating that is to show you a picture of my bottle of myrrh in my dispensary. This has to be extracted 90% alcohol because resins are not soluble in water. So they're soluble only in alcohol or organic solids. So to get the resin in solution, you have to have this very strong alcohol extraction. But as soon as they touch any, they dry on any glass, they reform as resin. So the myrrh bottle is coated with resin. Now put yourself back in the mind of the person who invented glassware to do the first analyses of the plant world. It takes a hell of a lot of work to make a burette or a pipette. You're not going to want that wrecked, are you? By a load of resin sticking on it. So the first thing you do when you invent glassware and start analysing the world is to get rid of the effing resins. So as soon as we had glassware, the research into resin stopped stone dead. And there is hardly any research into resins, which is good news for us, because we can still use that trick. So I have some very powerful approaches to gum disease, to throat infections, to any inflammation on any exposed mucosa. You just wash the surface with a high alcoholic extraction of myrrh or marigold. You have to extract it in 90% alcohol to get that resin out. And to make it bearable, you mix that with a 1:1 licorice, because the licorice is almost like tar at that level, and it holds the resin from in solution, lots of dumping. So you just mix those in various proportions. Possibly add some really high quality ECC. And you can laugh at any problem and laugh with it. It's not going to taste like paint stripper. It's not going to win any prizes for you thought you'd had a shot. Wait until you try this stuff. My God, it works. That's the resins, and they're the tacky quality in Emily's world. And there it is. This is frankincense. You see the resins in this case are quite hard, almost insoluble, and they used to be taken by powdering them and just taking the powder. Very unpleasant. There's a similar thing. It's the sap of particular trees you get in Central, Northern, Eastern Africa. And they were so important commercially that King Solomon, in his wisdom, decided he needed to get his hands on that trade. So he married the Queen of Sheba, which we call Ethiopia, because she ran the world's monopoly on myrrh and frankincense. Clever guy, Solomon. Final group. And we're done. Sapo is the Latin for soap. So saponins lather in water. So when you make a watery extraction of a plant with saponins and shake it, it has a froth. It's a plant detergent. But look at the things that have got them. Pretty impressive list, isn't it? Ginseng, licorice, astragalus. This is one of the, this now we don't use it anymore because it's almost extinct. Harmonious root from North America, a woman's remedy. Wild yam, another one from North America. The saponins are actually steroids, plant steroids. And we think that they work by interacting with our steroid metabolism in various ways, switching it, modulating it. There's a lovely book written by an old friend of mine, called Ginseng, the Root of Being. It's written back in the 1970s. Stephen was a gerontologist, someone who studied aging, and he spent all his life in a laboratory testing various agents on the cell life, and cell lines. And there's lots of things that extend cell lines, stop cell lines dying out, but all of them are very toxic. In other words, we wouldn't want to be eating them. And someone suggested, why don't we try ginseng, because there's a big cheese over in China, in It's meant to improve your health and life, longevity. And so he did, and he was amazed to discover that it also extended cell lines, but was widely used and consumed by humans. And he got so switched on that he became quite a specialist in animal medicine on the back of that story. So if you ever want to see the book, it's a real adventure story. The story of how he moved from studying things and cells to becoming one of the early experts on ginseng. So the root of being, the pharmacology of, no, the book is called The Root of Being, and the subtitle is The Pharmacology of Harmony. Damn, I saw that title. Stolen the two best titles. But he develops the idea that the saponins, which are the main active in ginseng, work by modulating the responses of the adrenal glands, the adrenal cortex. So you can respond to stress more appropriately. And you can switch into stress faster and switch out of stress faster. That's the balancing. It's a bit of sort of magic. Licorice, I'll come on to in a moment, but one of the things you notice about saponins in general is that they have a sweet taste. And licorice has an ingredient called glycyrrhizin, which I might have a picture of, or might not, which is 500 times sweeter than sugar. And Pocketees use licorice as their main sweetening agent, because you can use just a little bit of licorice and get quite appreciable sweet taste. In any concentration, they are emetics. Emetics, you know what that means? It means puking. So they're used traditionally for clearing up the stomach. We don't use them much in medicine anymore, because they're a bit crude, but sometimes you wish you could. You sometimes wish you could get stuff out quickly. But basically they do the reverse of the law of the gut. We're just saying, just switch the thing around, saying, come back out, technically yawn, isn't it? But interesting that if you take an emetic in a sub-emetic dose, so below the dose where it has an emetic property, it has an expectorant effect. It encourages clearing out of the lungs. That's what that means. And that's a reflex. Same sort of reflex we talked about earlier about the lungs being connected originally to the gut. So we use emetics quite often in cough mixtures, lower doses, to help hoik out bronchial congestion by reflex from the upper gut. Another example of acute pharmacology. So they are, some of these are expectorants, and licorice is a classic example. But they're also tonics, like ginseng, stranglers, and gynecological remedies. So some of the best remedies across the world that women have chosen, from modulating menstrual cycles, for doing all sorts of other work around obstetric work and so on, contain saponins. How on earth or in heaven did they figure that out? It's like the Bushmen with their 27 arrow poison, 27 antidotes. They knew it. They didn't know it was steroids, but they knew that their menstrual cycle or their fertility was managed by things like Hallonius root and wild yam. So they're the soapy quality, detergent quality in plants. And there's licorice. Probably the remedy I use most in practice, because of course it's got the nice taste, you can cover up lots of things. It doesn't, so you can mix licorice with bitters and you still get the bitter quality coming through. Obviously you still do, but it's less of a hit. So it's very good, particularly with younger patients. But liquids has all sorts of other benefits on the gut, on the adrenals. And this is glycyrrhizic acid. This is a steroid structure. And finally, an example of a steroid molecule, wild yam, which has all sorts of other properties. And we still have some time left. How about that? Bit of a whirlwind tour.
Fascinating.
Yeah, open up a few thoughts. So you're going to spend the next few years filling all those gaps in there, aren't you? Any quick questions? Any thoughts? Any follow-up thoughts? Any big goals? Yeah. Sounds like lots of goals, mate.
Can you talk about taste a little bit? I think you mentioned earlier you might say a little bit about taste and the effects.
Good point. So taste is a very good example of the reflex responses in action. So we've already heard about bitters. So all the effects of bitters are mediated by tickling those taste buds, which turn out also to be elsewhere in the body, by the way. So we know about them from their taste that they're all widespread. So this is an example of a taste not just telling you what the flavour is, but actually doing things. So the tastes are actually active, the taste buds are active agents. And in many traditional medicines were classified by their tastes. So we've got the example of the bitters. That's not just because they taste bitter, because they are bitter, and they do bitter things to the body. Each of the other tastes has a similar quality. So it's not just telling us what the food tastes like, they're actually doing things. So a simple example, the sweet taste bud, which incidentally is very closely, very similar in its structure to the bitter one. They are usually back to back in the tongue. And the word bittersweet is that one we probably know of. But if you do a little bit of chemistry on some, for example, one of the components of orange peel, it starts off by being slightly bitter, slightly tweak it, it becomes tasteless. You slightly tweak it again, it becomes intensely bitter. You slightly tweak it another way, it becomes 500, 600 times sweeter than sugar. Just slight shifting in the, not in the structure, just in the shape of things, will make major changes in how we receive it. So the sweet taste bud is very closely aligned with the bitter one, but it is very busy. When you taste something sweet, your insulin is already responding, even before any sugar hits your blood. It's pre-armade. So in terms of insulin protection, in terms of preventing diabetes, artificial sweeteners do not protect you just because they don't have sugar. They still switch on some of the insulin responses instantly, because that's the way it just seems. So well before it's needed, there's already more insulin in the system, simply because it's been given the heads up. Not the best taste buds. Simple example. Sour. Ever been in a hotel and been down to the buffet, breakfast bar? It's quite good to see divide the hotel guests up into those that go straight for the orange or grapefruit juice as soon as they come downstairs. The first thing they want is something sour. That's because sour tastes switch on the bile, contract gallbladder. gallbladder has been storing your bile all night. The liver has been working hardest while you're sleeping. One way of defining sleep is to shut down your body's function so that the liver can get on with its business. The liver is managing your housekeeping. All your internal functions unmanaged by the liver. If in doubt, with all those thousands of different jobs it's doing, dumps any junk into the bile. Bile is constantly being produced, but when you're not eating, it gets diverted into the gallbladder. So by the time you've woken up in the morning, you've got a full gallbladder. And if you feel, and you probably recognise this feeling, early morning feeling, just slightly biliary, bilious, maybe you've had a good night the night before, hitting something sour, chewing on a lemon, grapefruit, having orange juice, kicks the gallbladder, and you feels good instantly. That's the sour for you.
Could bitter do the same thing?
Yeah, bitter does more. But sour is specifically kicks the gallbladder, bitter doesn't do that.
Oh.
So bitter it dilutes the bile. So it flushes it through. Sour contracts the gallbladder so it gets then emptied of the bile. Both lead to more bile in the bowel. We're often looking for bile, by the way, in the bowel, because remember I was saying about turds floating? Thought I to remind you then, just in case you've got in people who live at primitive time. The average pre-modern human's transit time from here to here is less than 18 hours. The average modern developed inhabitant is between 24 and 36 hours. All right, work it out. 50% or more in doubling of transit time, which is twice as long or 50% as long more for junk to recycle. And bile includes quite a lot of junk, because as I said, it doesn't know what else to do with it, it dumps. So there's a lot of stuff that comes out, including a lot of medicines, conventional medicines come out of the bile. But as it's going down slowly, a lot of it gets reabsorbed. So you can imagine the liver thinking, oh shit, literally. I thought that was gone, but it's coming back around again because it's been sitting there too long. So for those of us who are aware of this, we sometimes wish, because we know that things are going down too slowly, that we could get the bile moving through a bit faster. And so we use these things, this house and the business, to help things along. And one of the simple ways of knowing if we're hit the right button is that the stool will change colour. And you soon get to ask complete strangers about the colour of their stool without any embarrassment. It's one of the most important things you want to know. And bile is yellow or green. So figure it. Very often, after this course of treatment starts, they report that their stool has changed colour. Yes. That's what we want it out. So that's an example of how you can do that simply by tickling a taste bud. Sweet, sour, salty. Salty is very interesting. It's wired up to the kidneys, the salt taste buds. So it's basically the kidney's job is to maintain electrolyte levels in the body. And it looks as though the salty taste buds are hardwired to send signals to the kidneys to do this, that, or the other with their electrolyte management. That's the four main ones. Don't give me two in an army. I don't know what the hell it is.
really just wondering about, like if you're,
Fasting?
yeah, like if you're not eating in the morning, is it still a good idea to stimulate it?
My first reaction to it was any questions I don't know. It's actually an honest place to start. But once you've got off that hook, you then say, well, what would have been our evolutionary history? And if we're living as a nomad, which we did for most of our evolutionary history, then we would have eaten occasionally. We would have eaten one thing at a time, by the way. So food combining would have been rare. We would have eaten a bit of meat, a bit of drugs, a bit of root, a bit of berries, all separately. So we would probably evolve to deal with one type of food at a time. So the haze diet is sometimes, variations on the idea that if in doubt, you separate your foods. And fasting is clearly what we were evolved to do. So normal to have gaps between meals. And there's a lot of research now that shows that intermittent fasting is one of the ways of the classic one is the 2-5-5-2 diet, 2 days a week, that's one example, there's many other ways of doing it. So if in doubt, try it, that's the other way. Because again, I don't know how fasting might suit you or you. So just open up your eyes, peel back your ears, and try. That answers your question. Yeah, that's another thing I get really head up about is when, remember I said I don't write recipes, because everyone, and once you've been through a consultation, sort of the average hour consultation that I have, you get it. Some might come with arthritis, but oh my God, their story is unique arthritis. You cannot give the same medicine that you give to the last person with arthritis because they're as different as we all are. So anyone who says something does something to people, get out a little more, because at most any instruction applies to 50% of the population. Even smoking. Don't publish that, but there are people who get off on smoking. It's a challenge, the body's meant to be challenged, but for God's sake, don't do that. I do that just to be mischievous. So anyone who says that something does something for everybody is basically hoodwinked. Everybody's different. Try it. Look it up. Keep diaries, whatever it is you need to do. And just figure it out for yourself. Same with bitters. We each responded differently to bitters. Try it. Try it again. Because many people who have your reaction become seriously addicted to bitters because it switches on something that was hidden.
Yeah, it was instantaneous. It was instantaneous.
Yeah, but if you did it again and again, you might find that there's something shifting. So, pursuing that one. You don't have to go far, the wind is just out the door.
So would you not recommend taking bitters every day?
No, because you might be too cold. So there are lots of people for whom bitters is not a good idea. It's a cooling thing. If you've got too much cold and you don't use bitters. That's where the individuality comes in.
But take some to Vietnam and Cambodia at Christmas.
If you're going to if you're going to be impacted by heat, then that's a standard thing to act as an antidote to the, when you step off a plane, it's like the oven door's opening. At that point, your stomach juices are drying up. Danger, danger, danger. That's what heat stroke does, is it dries up your stomach. Then anything you eat has an open door walking. So you need to keep your stomach juices flowing. Either eat the local tacos or chilies and or take your bottle of bitters with you.
So you don't build up an immunity by using it before you go somewhere?
No. I mean, it's decent, isn't it?
Yes,
Yeah.
it's good.
You use it when you need it.
Thanks.
No, there are long-term bitter regimes, but they're clearly designed for people who need that particular mix of digestive stimulation, cooling effect. So you might have a lot of heat, inflammatory heat or whatever, sometimes help there. You might have this hot and cold thing, we haven't got time, but the hot and cold thing is dead easy when you think about it. But one simple example is migraines. They are very serious disabling things. More or less divide them into two. A simple question to someone with a migraine is, would you prefer a hot pack or a cold pack?
Simon, we do have to about 11:15 if you...
We have till 11:15?
Yeah.
If you need to, yeah.
If you need to.
So your bladders must be bursting. If you answer that question, then you've really got halfway to working out what to do. Because if it's a hot pack you want, then it means you've got constrictory migraine. In other words, your blood vessels are clamping down because the heat opens them up. So you want heating remedies. Fever, for example, is a warming remedy. One of the standard migraine remedies. But probably only effective for those with vasoconstrictory, words, migraine in response to heat. About 70% of the migraine response. But about 30% of migraines are those who express a preference. There's some who don't like either. But of those who express a preference, about 30% would prefer a cold pack. And that's because they've got a dilator of the migraine. Versus an appetite, the cold will close them down. That's when you might think of bitters. Because that's almost always coming from the liver, which is one of the bitters we have most.
With the contraction and the dilation, is one related to hormones, like dilating? Is that more of a estrogen?
It's always hormones.
Okay.
I mean, hormones are the stuff, that's the way we talk with each. Internally, we talk with not so much the big hormones, but lots of chemicals the body produces. Neurohormones, whereas other ways that you describe it, but it's all chemical. So the answer is always yes, but what to make of it, God knows. You do what Emily does, you start with what you see, work backwards from there. So if it's a cold pack on your migraine that works, go for the cool. It's that simple.
Yeah.
But while we got it, I've already introduced you to hot and cold by the dead body, and then the children at the other extreme. But you can tell someone's got a cold illness because they want heat. This is really complicated. Some of the cold condition prefers heat. Hot packs, hot soups, hot baths. Their brain are warm when they go to bed. They notice drafts. They close windows. They want to keep warm. You've got either a cold constitution or you might have a cold illness. So you provide heating remedies from those cases. The old doctors, Hakims and so on used to look at the nail bed because the quickers used to be called because that changes colours very quickly. Because I've been doing a lot of talking by so it responds very quickly to how much activity there is. But if it's pale, if your tongue is pale, there's a whole stuff about tongues which we really haven't got time for. But a pale tongue is a sign of cold. So you just move into the warming remedies, the fennels and the cardamoms and the cinnamons and the gingers and so on. If it's a hot condition, you've got more activity, so you tend to thrash around a lot. You tend to walk into a room and say, bloody hell, this is stuffy and open windows. Everyone else is fucking freezing. You can always tell someone with a hot constitution because they call average winter's day in England racing. That's a classic hot pattern. And they often have liver problems. And they tend to, if in the hospital bed, you can tell the hot ones because they tend to throw the bedclothes off. Whereas the cold ones are all curled up fetal. Hot ones are like red, their tongue is red. They tend to heat up easily. They tend to want cold drinks and cold baths and cold splashes and cold things. Fairly complicated, isn't it? For them, you need cooling remedies like that. I really do think you have done very well to stay sitting with someone. Did you have a question? I thought I saw you. Any last ones?
Have you studied Chinese medicine? Yeah, that's what I thought. The way you're talking was very Chinese medicine.
Chinese, Ayurvedic, Galenic, in Europe, they all have the same principles.
Right.
If you see one of the very sort of big book that Kerry and I did, there's a whole chapter on the different traditions and the way they just tell out to what terms. They're all pretty much, they're all humans. It's all plants. We haven't changed that much. So you learn a lot by digging deep. Thank you.
Thank you.